Hey friends, SGT here. Thanks for joining us today. We have very special guests on the line, Brad and Mike from FullSpectrumSurvival.com. You know their videos, news in 2 minutes. And also on the line is Rory. Brad and Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you both for having us.
It's a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. With so much going on in the world today, we're going to talk about some very serious information. We're going to talk about disaster readiness. We're going to talk about the Philippines typhoon, the Fukushima disaster, and the survival DVD series that they've created. It's a very interesting story, crowdfunded, and you have a chance to get involved. Fellas, first, before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about your channel? I was looking at it today. You have more than 34,000 subscribers. What a success story. When did you guys start your YouTube channel?
A little over a year ago, we started the YouTube channel as mainly a way for us to get back to the community. Brad had originally owned a production company and was performing video and editing work for a different industry. And we were both of us were holding small private survival classes along with doing some private security here locally. And the people that we were helping and educating kept saying, you know, you really need to combine the video and editing production company skills with the survival skills that you teach. So after hearing that over and over and over again, we decided to just start a YouTube channel, reach out to the community, as a way to give back, basically, because as you know, a lot of people produce great content on YouTube. And it really grew from there.
That's right. If you're just looking for what people can do for their own channels, I would suggest highly just find something that you love and something that you have a high level of interest in, and just keep plugging at it and keep getting content out there.
Right, and fill a gap. There's a lot of gaps still left out there that YouTube users are looking for, and that's content that you can create that'll automatically, if you do it correctly, it's going to build a channel.
Yeah, I've always said that, you know, do what you love and success will follow. If it comes from a place of passion and honesty, you can't help but succeed. Fellas, I know today we're going to talk about a lot of important issues, disaster readiness, the Philippines typhoon, the Fukushima disaster, etc. One of the things that I do want to get your take on, though, that is really bothering me a great deal, that I think falls into that same category, is the Obamacare debacle. There are people now being thrown out onto the streets, figuratively, by insurance companies that are canceling their policies because of the actions of this criminal government. What is your take on Obamacare? Because when we talk about preparedness, what are these poor folks supposed to do when they literally are finding themselves without health insurance?
You know, you bring up a very good question. We have lost our Blue Cross and Blue Shield in the state of Florida as a result of the National Health Care Act.
You personally? Have you lost
personally?
You've lost
my
your health
family,
insurance?
Yes, personally. We were informed that our policy was only good until a future date in 2014, and then we were directed to the exchange, which I'm sure, I mean, once you go on the exchange, I haven't been there, but I'm sure if you did go there, the same policy would be in the thousands of dollars per month to match the coverage that my family was receiving from Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So it hits me in a personal level. In my household, I think our analyzation from the research that we've done is this is just the first step to a single payer system. They were out to capture a large part of the U.S. economy. I think it represents the medical industry represents a full 1/6 of the U.S. economy. They've captured that. It's just one more step that they've taken towards the socialist utopia that they're working towards.
The socialist utopia. It's truly an oxymoron, isn't it? I mean, the
yes,
ACA itself...
I say that tongue in cheek.
Oh, I know you do. And the ACA itself is an oxymoron, the Affordable Care Act. It's like the Patriot Act. It's like they deliberately deceive us through their language. It's always the opposite. Rory, have you had any issues with healthcare, any personal stories down there where you are?
Healthcare.gov. I have been out there. I spent about 45 minutes on that website yesterday, and from my personal experience, the site crashed twice while I was filling out the criminal forms that they have set up for you. And oh, by the way, all of your information that you plug in goes immediately to the IRS, the DHS, and one other, I can't remember the other letter in the alphabet soup, but it goes to another agency. So everything that I plugged in, and the further that I got into it, the more terrified that I became, because it was just like, you have got to be kidding me.
Well, I worry.
It was unbelievable, the questions.
But I worry about that, to hear you say that you went to fill out that paperwork. Here's the thing. I think people need to opt out. Now, that's very easy for me to say because my family hasn't lost our insurance. So when we talk about Obamacare and we're talking to an informed audience, that many of whom are now suffering the repercussions of this authoritarian healthcare act, it's easy to say opt out until you've lost your insurance. And then you're forced to go onto this exchange and enter all your personal information, knowing that it'll go to the NSA, to the IRS, to the HHS, to this criminal government. It seems to me the last thing you'd want to do is put your personal information on that site. Guys, what's your take on this?
If you're asking from a personal standpoint, our take is to develop relationships outside of that system with our healthcare physicians. We don't believe neither of us are going to choose to go on to the exchange and take some subpar level of policy when we're fully capable of speaking with the physicians or finding a new physician that that shares the same type of views that we do and step out of the system. And that's the only way we would see from a personal standpoint moving forward, because as soon as you said, like Rory had mentioned, you're basically opening HIPAA up for everyone to see all of your records, any type of test you've had. That's going to be public knowledge basically by you going ahead and filling out these forms. So we don't think that that's the right way to go. We think that there's a plan behind that plan. So we're going to go a different route, and we would suggest that everyone talk to their personal physicians or find healthcare physicians that'll work with them to find care for them and their family.
And Mike brings up a great point. We're seeing reports of doctors being dropped from insurance plans, and doctors are going to be in the same position that the individual is in, and they're going to be looking for other avenues to provide care, because doctors, a lot of them, they're really in it for providing care, and they do care about their community and about the people that they treat. So you will be able to find a physician that will discuss care outside of the shadow government controlled rule of Obamacare.
We can move on from this topic here in a second. I think the scariest part about all of this is that catastrophic coverage is what we all worry about, right? We worry about having to be hospitalized for any real length of time, any very serious procedures which can bankrupt a family. That's why people need insurance, is to protect themselves from those things. If you have the common cold, I love the idea of reaching out to your doctor, developing a relationship outside of the system, and paying him cash for that service, for that 1 hour, for that visit. It's the catastrophic coverage that scares me, and there's a lot of people that just won't have it moving forward. It's really eugenics, I think, at that point. If this government kicks people off their health care and they have nothing, there's no safety net, how is that not eugenics?
Well,
exactly what it is.
They said, I remember at the beginning when they were talking about it, that there were not going to be death panels. But in fact, when you are choosing who gets care and who doesn't, by the forms of policies that they make available that are affordable or truly unaffordable, then you in fact do have death panels, because you're choosing to make those services unavailable to the population that can't afford them.
Yeah.
That by definition is a death panel.
That's right.
I mean, if you can't get to the care, then you die.
That's right.
That's right. And it's not anecdotal. It's actually happening. It's quantifiable. There are people with cancer that had doctors and had protocols and had hospital relationships currently who have now been told they're losing their insurance on December 31st. Those people are going to be completely screwed. And basically, I think, told to go home and die unless Obamacare actually works, which none of us think it will. Fellas, let's talk a little bit about disaster readiness. There's no better example. Well, first let's talk about the Philippines typhoon. When something that absolutely horrific and devastating happens, there's really no level of preparedness that can save you from that type of destruction. What's your reaction to that horrific typhoon?
On the first part of your question, you spoke about preparing for that type of event. Those are exactly the type of events that we talk about preparing for. It's the ones that you have to get out of the way from. And there are a lot of events that fit inside of that threat matrix that put you in a position where you are better off deploying mobility to get out of the way of the storm, so to speak. So those very instances, whether it's a war-torn area in a foreign country, and hopefully not our own soon, or it's a superstorm or a volcano or a tsunami, it's those very issues that we believe that through education, some simple preparedness, and skill-based knowledge, you can survive those type of events as long as your situational awareness becomes a daily practice to know what the threats are, you can avoid them and survive.
Thanks for that, Mike. But Brad, let me ask you, what is your thoughts on the typhoon? Because they were talking about sustained winds of, 140 to 200 miles per hour. That's like a F4 tornado coming through your neighborhood and just sitting there for half a day. It's unbelievable, that level of destruction. So even if you had food stores or water stores or any type of backup system in case of a collapse, you have lost it all in a situation like that. I mean, it's so tragic with more than 10,000 people dead. I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime storm, but powers that be are preparing us to think that these are just, this is the beginning of terrible monster storms, many to come.
No, that's right. We're speaking with different scientists and researchers that show that this isn't this is going to become a new normal that we're all going to have to deal with. Now, the people in the Philippines, and we have a team not directly in Tacloban but nearby, that all of the people down to the residents on the shorelines, they were warned days in advance of the coming storm. They were warned to gather their material belongings, get in a vehicle, get in a government-provided bus, and get out of the area, which is really, mobility is just a key aspect of survival preparedness, being prepared to move, taking with you your preparedness items that will help you survive a disaster without having to be forced into an evacuation shelter or without being forced into a situation where you're left out on the streets. Now, immediately following the storm, there were over 400,000 people in evacuation shelters. The team that we have nearby was able to go to other friends and other relationships' houses in the area and get away from the storm without being forced into the situation where you're stuck in an evacuation shelter. So they were able to take their preparedness items with them, which included food, which included water purification items, and get to another area where, even though they didn't have power, they were able to survive without being forced into some of the really disastrous situations that people who didn't have the ability to make those preparations what they were forced into. So mobility is definitely key. Now, you're right, you can't take your entire house with you, but you can take your life with you, and that's what we prepare for.
I want to ask you guys this, and if it's off topic, we can move on, because I think when we watch News in 2 Minutes, we watch your productions, you don't often delve into conspiracy theories. You generally keep it pretty clean with topical news delivered without the, the Mockingbird media spin. That said, as you look at any of the evidence of the size of this storm, this typhoon that hit the Philippines, have you looked at any of the work from Dutch since? Have you given any thought to the idea of weather as a weapon? There's a document, a military document that was released in, I believe, 1996 called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. Do you have any thoughts on the size of that storm? Are there any anomalies that you've noticed about that storm that would give you pause for concern?
Well, Sean, you bring up a great point in that weather modification, it has been weaponized by governments around the world. And you talked about conspiracy, and we don't really touch on conspiracy per se in the News in 2 Minutes, because so many conspiracies are becoming well-known fact that we find that you don't have to hit the fringe really to bring the current and relevant news information to the people, because day after day we're seeing a new conspiracy become fact. What we do see is that climate change, now not global warming, but climate change is a real event that people are having to prepare for. This storm, we didn't see anything that would lead us to believe that there was any type of weaponry that would have pushed the storm towards the Philippines or made it larger. What we do see is that the general direction that the Earth is going in right now is something that is going to drive superstorms, super typhoons like this, and make them something that we all have to prepare for.
Let's move on then. Let's talk about the Fukushima disaster. What do you make of the future of the folks that have to live in Japan, whether you're in that Fukushima hell zone or if you're in Tokyo? What's your take on the ongoing disaster and the fact that the Pacific is being polluted and there seems to be no good plan to circumvent this?
This is Michael speaking, and I'm going to speak predicated on the fact that TEPCO has not told the truth and will not tell the truth. And the fact that TEPCO is being used by the Japanese government as the front agency to take blame. So everything I'm going to say is based upon what they've released so far, because Brad and I do not have boots on the ground, and we have not taken our own readings to give you a threat assessment. We can tell you just by the information that they have disclosed that you're going to experience a shortening of lifespan for the people in the immediate area that were affected by particles that were released into the atmosphere as a result of the initial hydrogen explosions at the power plants.
With the news coming out this week that the fuel rods are actually bent, and that they were bent, some of them as long ago as 25 years, and others that were bent 10 years ago, they knew that this was coming. They had to know. They had to know that something was going to break down, and that they've got these bent fuel rods down in the pools, and I don't see how they're going to be able to get them out. What do you guys see? What do you guys see as far as that, which is sort of the next stage of this whole event? I mean, within the next couple of weeks, they're going to have to do something in order to try to get these bent fuel rods dealt with, as they're pumping, 300 tons of plutonium-laced water, cesium-laced water into the ocean. What do you guys see as far as that happening? What's going on there?
Well, Rory, that's if you and I believe, which I don't know that neither you or I do believe, because we spoke a little bit before the show started, that in fact they weren't aware that they weren't going to be able to extract the rods. We fully believe that they were aware that they were not going to be able to extract the rods. And this is just a form of slow disclosure to the catastrophe that's been building for the last 3.5 years. So to us, it's just par for the course. Now, what comes next and what type of buildup and focus do they take, we're not sure. But we know it's a catastrophe of global proportion, without a doubt.
Well, you guys, what's funny? With all the things going on in the world that are really, really bad for humanity, not the least of which is this debt-based monetary system, but, GMOs, they're poisoning our food. Fukushima, there's no end to this radiation in sight. It almost seems to be purposeful, and what a calamity it's become. Chemtrails, the list is longer, add to it. I've heard this said before, and it's not mine. I think Alex Jones has talked about this a bit. It's almost as if an alien race wanted to come to this planet and destroy humanity, this is the program they'd roll out. I just wrote a piece about this recently too, called Life-Changing Info Satanists Like the Rothschilds Don't Want You to Know. You are precious and special. Does our DNA prove the universe was created? And I just think it's fascinating because as I learn more and I go further down the rabbit hole, I've kind of come to the conclusion that what we're talking about is spiritual warfare. It's alive and well in the world, and the people that maybe are aligned against humanity are Luciferians, which explains all this nightmarish stuff that a normal human being would not normally embrace. But these people embrace it.
Well, you're absolutely right. I know in that article you quoted a couple physicists. One was an astrophysicist that said, if you look deeper, you'll find computer code written in the fabric of the cosmos. And there was a reply from a physicist that said, computer code, strings and bits of ones and zeros, that is correct. That's from what we're seeing, that is exactly what the design characteristics are of our universe from all of the well-accomplished physicists and researchers, is that there is in fact a code, and it's written this way. So having a form of divinity create this code is something that aligns with our belief system. We think that if you look at the inner workings of the Hadron Collider, and you look at how they stenciled in Hebrew and Sumerian languages and running over them with lasers, all that points to a very broad, deeper knowledge base that exists in the high levels of academia that aren't really hitting the general public.
Yeah, and thanks for reading those quotes. That was Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sylvester James Gates having that exchange, and both of them are very pragmatic, left-brained scientists, and it just moves me when we see scientists themselves moved by the complexity and the grandeur and the beauty of the design that they have discovered, the computer programming in our own DNA, which speaks to the cosmos. It speaks to this creation that's built into the fabric of the world, in the solar system, in the universe. And we didn't just happen by accident. And that's what the powers that be want you to believe. That's what I think is so insidious about this. The powers that be do not want you to know about the golden ratio. They do not want you to know about the computer code in the DNA. They do not want you to know that you're special and that it didn't just happen by accident.
You're absolutely right. And if you take a snapshot of different religions around the world, and one example is the Muslim religion in the Middle East, as soon as the people are empowered by their religion, they have less reliance on the government. And if you take a look at America, as soon as you take away the religion, they immediately have more reliance on the government. So just from a snapshot, just a small point of view onto why here in North America religion is looked down upon and you're not allowed to talk about it in the public, that's exactly why. It's another method of control.
And just to be clear for the audience, I'm not proselytizing. This isn't about religion and organized religion, which I have a big problem with, on many levels. This is about spirituality. This is about being in tune with the reality of the creation that scientists are now discovering at the subatomic level. That's what's so darn inspiring. That's truth. Yeah. If you want to love science, if you want to look to science for answers, then you have to respect that research that's being done that is changing minds of even the most ardent atheists. And I find it very inspiring.
I agree, and I think if you can circle that thought back to your original statement about Satanists. Obviously, if you look at the collapse phase or the societal collapse, you can see that there are people who have little or no regard to humanity. We're all considered useless eaters. So if we back up to the furthest point and say this reality is divinely created, then you automatically have the fight between good and evil. So it's something that has to be looked at, and you have to look at it for yourself and ask yourself, why would these things be continuously allowed to happen if there was not a force of good and evil that are operating?
That's right. And we have had personal relationships where we have talked with people and helped people through difficult times who have been a victim of different powers, such as satanic ritual abuse, where they were affected by a certain type of abuse, and we have helped them through their different processes. It is real, and it does exist, and people are looking to collapse not only the society, but further their control on humanity through a religion that does not promote health and does not promote personal spirituality. So you're absolutely right. And I know, Sean, you don't talk about religion very much, but you are absolutely right in that this collapse is being done by a design of some nature.
Well, I really appreciate this exchange, you guys. Thank you for your candor. I really appreciate it, because for a long time I have said at this point it's humanity versus the banksters, and maybe I need to amend that, and I think I have in a couple of videos probably, where it's at this point, it's humanity against the Luciferian banksters. Well, let's move on, fellas. Well, is anybody shocked, as I am, that the Japanese government is actually being allowed to operate this way? Where is the international outrage that TEPCO, an inept company that has lied at every turn for over 2 years, that they alone would be allowed to try to remedy this, as you put it, a global situation? If they get this wrong, we will talk about, and I've said this before, a pre-Fukushima world and a post-Fukushima world. And there seems to be every evidence, all signs are pointing to the fact that they will get this wrong. They've got workers in there making $200 a day. Many of these workers are saying they haven't been properly trained. And the future of the world is literally in the hands of these TEPCO employees. And I just find it shocking that there's no international support or an international demand to support this effort.
No, you're absolutely right. What we are witnessing the beginning stages of what could be a nuclear holocaust. Now, you talked about the international community. If the international community, and by community we mean governments, if they acknowledge the severity of the disaster at Fukushima and made that acknowledgement disclosed to the public, the general public of the world would demand the shutdown of every nuclear power plant in the world. And that's something that you and I both know they can't have, or we would have immediate unrest.
That's right, because one of the two largest contributors to the rule of law, or the availability of calories through food and energy. And if you pull either one of those away, you have a loss of the rule of law. So they're dealing with a global population issue through energy production that's just as severe as the accident itself.
Why doesn't the governments around the world, why are they just sitting idly by and watching this thing melt, literally melt into the planet?
Well, what we see is that they're not, they are publicly sitting idly by, but they are on damage control behind the scenes and threat assessment behind the scenes and trying to stay ahead, at least for their own skin, of what's going to happen next. Now, Fukushima is not alone on being a genie-type reactor that is built near a fault line. There are hundreds of them built near fault lines, and there are far too many to sleep soundly at night that are in the exact same situation, where if we reached a point of criticality, if we reached a nuclear fallout, we could not entomb them like we were able to, and we from the international community, in the Chernobyl accident. And if this happens across the world, if this happens on the other side of the world, or God forbid, here in the U.S., we will see the exact same thing happen. They can't do anything about it for the next 20 years. All they can do is slowly try to mitigate the damage.
Now, Brad and I have been talking. To us, one of the worst parts about the catastrophe is that dry casket storage does eliminate a large statistical part of the equation to have criticality with a large number of nuclear rods in a cooling pool. Now, it's not economical from a price standpoint to utilize dry casket storage, but we're surprised that other groups have not stood up and start demanding it. And even if it does work out to be just about money, it would be better for us all, humanity, to pay extra money to have dry casket storage for the fuel rods, because you are talking about, a possible extinction level event if you were to have large earthquakes and have multiple Fukushima problems at once.
That's right, and that brings up a great point of preparedness. We get asked all the time, Fukushima is a disaster. People email us and say, I see that I'm going to have to deal with it. I see that my children are going to have to deal with it. What can I do? There's a lot of things that people can do from an individual standpoint. The first thing is understand the disaster, understand what a millisievert is, understand the different levels of radiation and how it will affect you as a human being, and then understand mitigating procedures. Is pectin a viable option, the same pectin that I can buy at the store? Is that a viable option for me to mitigate some of the radiation intake? Is Prussian blue, the compound, a viable option for me to mitigate that? And then know the skills of how to mitigate it, when to move, and what to do if a nuclear disaster happens in an area near you. And that's a lot of what our outreach teaches. That's a lot of our passion for it, is making sure that people understand those skills and what they can do so that you don't fall into a fatalistic point of view.
Right, because if you look at the radionuclei that were released, it's a very high amount of cesium-137. If you go back to Chernobyl, that was exactly the case. So we see a lot of mitigation techniques that were very successful and very well documented, that you should be aware of and have the supplies to take if in fact that criticality is experienced again, and it's so severe that here in North America we're going to experience a Chernobyl type of fallout event here as a result of what happens at Fukushima and what they do at that plant.
On that theme, let me ask you guys, you mentioned pectin, you mentioned Prussian blue. Help us understand, if you have the expertise in this at all, about iodine. What's the difference between iodine or potassium iodide? I've heard that iodine will protect against thyroid and glandular system damage from radiation. But I don't know when to take it, which one to take, how often do you take it, should you not take it, should you take it? Do you only take it if you're in the immediate vicinity of a disaster like this one?
The producers of KI, which is our nuclear regulatory's solution to act as a thyroid blocker for some radionuclei, can be found on any website if you push in KI. We know Shane Connor personally. He operates and sells units to measure radiation. He sells KI. He's got a lot of great information on his site. Everybody's welcome to go there. There's some specific instructions that I don't want to quote on air because I'm not sure about the exact dosages. We know that apopectin was very successfully used. The trial conducted during the 1 month stay at the sanatorium in Belarus resulted, by administering oral pectin to children, a 62.6 reduction in their cesium-137. So that's huge. That's the difference between someone's lifespan being shortened by 25 years to having an average lifespan again. So, and you can also find that very easily on the internet. Just look up apopectin and see what the doses are. Now, you have to be able to measure it, and we suggest you be able to measure radiation for yourself, because otherwise you're relying on someone else and their interpretation of the reading. So we encourage all of the listeners to get educated, because we really, if we talked about the Healthcare Act is what we started talking about, and then the second thing we spoke about together was the Philippines and the superstorm, and now we're talking about Fukushima. What we're really talking about is a societal level collapse. That's really where this is going. So it's whether it's Fukushima or it's another power plant, or whether it's the N6N1 pandemic that just made H6N1 virus that just made the jump to humans. Now, thank God, Tamiflu resulted in the recovery of the person that was infected. But no matter what we're talking about here, and we're going to experience changes as humans going forward. So ending phase 1 of a societal collapse and entering phase 2, we all have to re-educate ourselves on survival tactics as humans. What do we do? What skill sets do we have to develop? What do we have to understand about certain dangers? And then be able to deploy remedies or mitigation procedures to make sure our children are safe going forward, to make sure they have the skills necessary to go forward. And then obviously your effort in bringing the information to the people so they can see the need, that's really why we're here on your show today, is because we believe in the cause. We believe you have to educate about the environment, what's happening, about the political structure of the government and what's happening, and what we can all do together to move forward and have a quality of life that I don't think we've really had in the last 5 or 6 years, because we're just now waking up to really how bad it is.
And just to interject for the listeners, I think when you mentioned Ki, that's potassium iodide is what you're referring to, right?
That's right. That's right. The human thyroid gland can't tell the difference between stable and radioactive iodine. So when you're taking potassium iodide, it's going to block the radioactive iodine from entering your thyroid. Basically, you're going to overload your thyroid with the good, and none of the bad will be able to get into it. But you have to understand when to take it. Like you said, when should I? You have to understand, is there a danger in taking it? Well, there's an increase in people who have an allergy to iodide. So there are some dangers. People should test themselves. People should really that's all part of just the understanding of threat mitigation, threat assessment. I'm looking at Fukushima. What do I do? Well, of course, here on the east coast of the U.S., we don't have a need right now to take potassium iodide. But pectin is a viable option if you are consuming products that have an increased level of radiation due to the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
Right, but you had originally asked, Sean, about could it have helped the people of Japan? Absolutely. The second largest quantity of radionuclide released during the original accident in Fukushima was iodine-131. So it is criminal that they didn't disperse Ki to the residents and to the children. It is really just criminal. I really can't even say anything more than that.
And it sounds scary, potassium iodide. You're like, if you don't know what that is, you don't know you think it could be injurious if you take it and you don't know what you're doing. And I guess it's just a simple salt, right? And it's pretty basic stuff.
That's right. It's a stable, non-radioactive iodine.
Okay.
But people can't have an anaphylactic allergic reaction to it, so it would be a good thing to get some and just test it on your skin first, see if you have a reaction, or get with better than that, since we're not health professionals, get with a doctor to do an allergy test.
Right, but again, you cannot just use iodized salts, because you couldn't take enough. You would die by overloading yourself with sodium. It has to be specifically potassium iodide in the form of Ki to be safe. Okay. Because if you just tried to... Because they add in the United States, our country, because of the way we've managed over the years the farmland, we are all deficient in iodine. So they added it as an additive for human health into the salt, over and above what's naturally occurring. But you cannot use that to block your thyroid from radioactive iodine-131.
That's right.
And speaking of destroying the farmland, with Fukushima blowing into the West Coast, all of the debris is now coming in the ocean water. We've seen the images of the melting starfish on the west coast of this country. And that's where the salad bowl is, which is in the heart of California. And that's where a lot of our food comes from. Even here, I'm in Tennessee, you guys are in Florida, and a lot of our food comes from there. So my question is, how long is it going to be before the landmass is absolutely saturated from the ocean with all of this cesium-infused ocean water coming into the state of California? How long is it going to be before it starts affecting the food supply? I personally have already stopped, or I'm slowing way down on the amount of food that I consume that comes out of California. So the other part of the question would be, will the apple pectin help in my consumption of foods that come from California? Because I love avocados, but anyway.
No, you're absolutely right, and we commend you for taking your own mitigation procedures to understand where your food is grown and any dangers that would have with it. It's absolutely already in the food supply. Now, what a person can do is purchase locally. If you don't live on the west coast of the United States or on the west coast of North America, purchase locally, and you're going to start your own mitigation process there. The second thing that we would recommend people do is just start to understand the dangers. Look at your consumption of Pacific sea life, of Pacific fish. Look at your consumption of Pacific grown oranges, things like that, really where you have the danger areas of consuming the highest amount of radioactive material, and then just mitigate that and move on to the locally grown foods. Now, pectin, absolutely, we're proponents of using pectin just because it's something that people already consume. If you drink a lot of apple juice, you have a lot of pectin intake. So we definitely recommend that people start realizing what they can do with that, and it helps to remove lots of heavy metals from your body, not just radiation.
But if I'm consuming a lot of apple juice and the apples are grown in Washington State, then I'm right back to zero, and
that's right.
Actually doing more harm than good.
You're absolutely right. We personally look for things like Michigan apples, things like that, New York apples. It just takes a little bit of extra time and understanding when you get into the grocery store to see where your food's coming from.
But
go ahead.
I want to say, just for the viewers, that the level, if you look at what happened during Chernobyl and the level of fallout, 22% of the country of Belarus became uninhabitable by Chernobyl. We don't have that type of situation here in the United States or anywhere near it. We are all walking around with residual particles of Chernobyl in us. They will be here for generations to come. What are the long-term health effects? I think that other things are going to kill you faster. Now, we can go to the Netherlands today, and they still recommend in some areas that you do not eat the fungi that are present there because as a result of Chernobyl. But we're not dealing with that level of catastrophe here in the United States by any means at this point. Now, mitigation, we're talking about being very, very careful and selective what you eat, because I would not want to eat fish that are swimming or going through a migration process where they could be going through and becoming toxic during their migration and then end up at my family's dinner table. But having said that, looking at through the breadbasket of our country, I'm not as concerned as I would be about eating an orange from an orange tree right off the coast of California, or a piece of Pacific tuna. Those are two things that I would avoid, not necessarily because I'm going to receive any type of lethal dose, but because I'm not interested in raising my exposure level to a danger that I know that exists.
That's right. This is for lifetime changes to your amount of radiation exposure, so that you can start the process now, because we do believe that Fukushima, and I think that you both believe the same thing, Fukushima is going to be a lifetime event. It's going to be with us they've admitted for no less than the next 20 years where it is seeping radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. Who knows if we'll have another event of criticality. So starting the procedures now to understand the changes you need to make so that you don't experience a shortening of your life or a loved one doesn't experience a shortening of their life. That's really our goal here.
Right, because right now it's just another cancer-causing agent, basically, and you can rack that up with hot dogs if you eat them every day, 4 times a day.
Well, and this is a conversation all about taking personal responsibility because, as you guys mentioned, right after the Fukushima disaster occurred, the Japanese government didn't supply its citizens with potassium iodide, nor did it probably even make that recommendation. We can't count on these governments to be honest with us, to help us, to guide us through these disasters. We all need to learn. We need to take personal responsibility and do our own research and prepare, and that's the key, which I think is a great segue to your Survive the End of the World as You Know It DVD series, the one that you guys are working on, which I think you're doing some crowdfunding for. Tell us a little bit about your new DVD series.
Sure. We're also in the production of the world's first preparedness film with a production group. And what we have found during the production of that film is that there is a limited amount of condensed information that a viewer can take home, put in their DVD player, and get real instructional information from. So while we have access to the movie quality cameras, we're going to make a once in a lifetime survival DVD series that is going to provide people not only with entertainment but with instructions of the things that they can do, the skills that they can build right now to survive a disaster in their area
or globally.
That's right.
Are you guys doing crowdfunding?
We sure are. The entire series is crowdfunded. Now, what people are able to do is that they're not just donating to the creation of the series. With each contribution, they will get the DVDs of their choice. So what they're able to do is make this happen, because this does involve the entire community to make it happen. And by contributing to the series, they're going to get those DVDs. So it's not just a contribution to be able to make it possible. What they're in effect doing is prepaying for their survival and preparedness readiness DVDs, but we couldn't do it without them.
That's right. We really do believe, just as I know, or I think that both of you believe, is in order for us to maintain a level of control of our own lives and the lives of our families, we have to start just working within our communities. That's an important part of control. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think the only way to take our system back from the criminals that want to enslave us is to take it back locally. It all starts locally, whether it's for your food sources, your relationship with your doctors, farmers. It all needs to start locally. In terms of government, too, get involved in your city council. Go to the meetings. Get the fluoride out of your water. Taking our country back and returning us to a republic by and for the people all has to start locally, because the feds have all the power.
That's right. And we agree with you 100%. We think that you have to concentrate locally. Now, we are blessed with, of course, meeting people such as yourselves and other individuals that are personalities either on the internet or on the radio where we can reach a wider audience. But Brad and I are really focused on our local community. Everybody we work with, we try and have them local, because when disaster strikes, and it will strike, I think we looked at some Red Cross statistics that we actually made part of our campaign. 50% of adults have experienced or will experience one emergency in their life where they'll lose utilities for 3 days, they will have to evacuate and not be able to return home, or they will find themselves in a position where they cannot communicate with friends and family during a catastrophe, or they'll have to provide life-saving first aid. That's half of us walking around are going to experience one or more of those things in our lifetime. So knowing people locally, like you're saying, that's the best case scenario for being able to help one another and to provide assistance and to grow and have ultimately more control.
That's right. And that's really the basis for the DVD series, is to build those skills, to give the viewer the ability to build those survival and preparedness skills to be able to help themselves and help others when a disaster strikes, not if a disaster strikes. And the goal on the campaign is $18,000. We're almost there at the making of this radio show today. We're at $17,000. We just encourage all of the listeners to go to fullspectrumsurvival.com. They'll see the link to the Indiegogo campaign. It's the first image that they'll see. It says click here, and watch the campaign video. If it's something that you're interested in, if you know that there's skills you need for survival and preparedness, contribute to it. Get your DVDs. The first DVD will be out in December. And help us make the campaign and help us get beyond it so that we can increase the production value and really give more back to the community.
Well, the final takeaway, guys, is why not prepare? You know, if the data is correct and 50% of us are going to be hit with a 3-day power shutdown at one point in our lives, we'd be foolish not to prepare while we still have time. And preparing isn't that hard. Sometimes the hardest part is taking the first step. And maybe the first step, if you haven't started, is to visit fullspectrumsurvival.com. or check out the YouTube channel, Full Spectrum Survival. We're pretty good about posting their 2-minute news updates on a daily basis, so you can always check them out at SGT Report as well. So Brad and Mike from Full Spectrum Survival, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. We've really enjoyed your work with SGT, what you do, your outreach to the community. We support it 100%, so we're just glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. We sure do appreciate your support as well. Rory, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm really glad to get to speak with you guys. It's been a real pleasure, a real honor.
Oh, thank you. Ours as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all your knowledge with us. Guys, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for supporting us by visiting sgtreport.com. And don't forget the libertymill.com as well, where we provide real news, truthful news, anti-Mockingbird media news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right, guys, thanks, and have a wonderful week.